From the center of the galaxy, this is ForceCenter, a show about pop culture, Star Wars, and the ultimate adventure, life itself. Sometimes the order changes, but I'm here. I'm Ken Napzok.
I'm Joseph Scrimshaw.
And I'm Jennifer Landa.
And we are here to answer some cues from yous. That's right. We got some cues picked out from Patreon and cues for yous. I'm not saying it sticks as a title, but we're going to have a lot of fun. We got some deep, I don't even call them questions. We got some wonderful thoughts that we're going to get to today. Before I do that, though, as always, I want to remind you that today's podcast and show is brought to you by Audible, and you can get a free audiobook download and a 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/ForceCenter. Over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. We've been doing this read for a long time for a reason. It helps support the show, and it gets you an audiobook and a 30-day free trial. It's all real, and we recommend today Rebel Rising by Beth Revis is a book to check out. We've been kind of putting that one out there to have people maybe revisit it or hear it for the first time. Download your free audiobook today by going to audibletrial.com/ForceCenter. Once again, that's audibletrial.com/ForceCenter for your free audio book. That is 1A. Joseph, we also have an ask.
That's right. We got two asks. One is about our Patreon. Hey, where all these cues from yous come from. We ask yous on Patreon to give us these cues. We are back up over 400 paid subscribers, which we deeply appreciate. We are trying to get to 415. When we reach 415, we'll do a special Patreon-only stream. Maybe what we should do is it can just be a live stream where we list films we haven't seen and see how many people we can shock with what films we haven't seen, since people had a lot of fun being shocked by us not seeing Lion King. Jennifer has seen Lion King, of course.
Yes.
We also want to let you know that we're not going to be posting on X/Twitter, but we are on both Blue Sky and Thread. So if you'd like to check out those different social media sites, please do follow ForceCenter there. And all three of us are on all of those sites as well. So you can, follow us individually as well. Any other thoughts on the asks, Ken?
Good asks. Good reading of the asks.
All right, we are going to move on to our cues. In the cues, both do come to us a little bit of essay form, which we encourage. We want to know where people are coming from, what's their perspective. This one comes to us from Boombox Music Talk, who says, it's been known for a long time that George always wanted to be able to just have actors say lines and then control them how he sees fit. Thus why he ventured into CGI and ultimately developed the Clone Wars series. Animation is a perfect example of being able to have full control of your actors and your storytelling. Then you have that spin out into, of course, Rebels, The Bad Batch, Tales of, etc. Add in that you have The Apprentice and Dave Filoni learn with George and contribute greatly to and eventually take over the animation side of the house, as well as the heart and soul of what it means to be Star Wars. You all have talked often about how there are various entry points to Star Wars, and we've seen that in real time with the prequel resurgence. Lastly, you have the fandom starting to fracture, or has been for a while. Let's remove the whole woke agenda conversation, which is another topic, or rather side of this conversation. And what I feel is that there are a ton of people that their Star Wars comes from the animation side. Even me, born in 77 and originally an OG kid, I love animation and adore the Star Wars animation storytelling to the point that it's even really what I look at as the blueprint now. So I posit that one of the reasons for the divide is you have a large portion of the audience that comes from that side and loves a lot of the new storytelling. And I would venture to say that a big percentage of the folks who complain are the ones who have never been tied into the animation, so they don't understand how the storytelling has evolved. Would you all agree? Disagree? Why? Why not? What other ideas do you feel are responsible for the divide? Is there a way to bridge it back together? Or do we let the past die and it just continues to evolve for a new audience? Thanks so much for reading my essay. Thanks, Boombox Music Talk, for writing your essay. A lot of places to go with this. Jennifer, where do you start with this thought about general division in Star Wars, but specifically how it relates to animation?
I think that this is a very fair assessment. And I think about the time when the Clone Wars was on air, and it really did kind of feel like the Star Wars fans who loved the Clone Wars were keeping Star Wars alive. Like there was no live action stuff, and it was a very robust, positive community. It was very celebratory. It was fantastic, to be honest. I really enjoyed it. And that's when I got involved in talking with people online. And then when the movies came back, it seemed like, and since then, it does kind of feel like it has become negative, but that's probably a variety of reasons. But I do wonder, the people who complain constantly, I don't think you can separate that from the woke agenda, because it does feel like, if you're complaining constantly, why are you still here? Like, if nothing out of all these years has satisfied you, you haven't found anything except for the films of the original trilogy. There's a lot of Star Wars since then. I don't know. But that's
Yeah.
where I start.
Yeah. Ken, where do you start?
Yeah, I think I get where you're coming from, Jen, on that too. I'll separate it out as best I can, because I think I've had a lot of conversations with a lot of folks who are not there for the socio-political side, but who don't like the new stuff. And that new stuff does even kind of begin with either the prequels or the Clone Wars series. And it's been a conversation I've had with them for a very long time. And I think there's some truth to what Boombox Music Talk is saying, where things did evolve, where if you either got on board with the Clone Wars or not, it's not completely binary, but like, yeah, you started to be open to seeing Star Wars in a different way than the OG trilogies, or maybe even the prequel days. I think a lot of my conversations, I had one not 2 weeks ago with a friend who was just like, I'm an original trilogy person, and I just have to, that's what I am. And that's a good revelation to have, a good self-revelation to have, because I'm with it. As after a while, it's like, well, then cool. Then you don't need to continue trying to watch the new stuff then, because there's nothing I can tell you. Because our conversations aren't about socio-political. In fact, we're on the same political side, if you will. It's more of just like, you got to move the story forward. You got to have new characters. You got to have new approaches, but also the same big themes. All those things that we've talked about for years here. And some of these people, and this particular person, again, these are real good friends of mine, they just shut down. They just don't see it. And a lot of them, you do kind of have that, you dig a little deeper. And it's like, oh, did you watch Rebels? Oh, no, I didn't watch Rebels. Cartoon? Did you watch Bad Batch? That's my favorite Star Wars show right now. No, Bad Batch. What's Bad Batch? Like, it happens time and time and time again. And I'm not saying you need to watch those things. I'm not saying you have to watch everything in Star Wars. I'm just saying at the root of a lot of those conversations I have with friends off air, not on podcasts, that is kind of the divide. So good starting point.
Yeah, I think that's.
Sorry, may I
Go
ask
ahead,
a question?
please.
Do they complain online? That's what I wonder. Like, I feel like I know people like that as well, but they don't go online and share their thoughts.
Some of them do. And some of them even have stopped their podcasts. But yeah. Some of them do, but not all of them. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I know a lot of the similar people who are generally our age, grew up with the original trilogy, even if that was with, VHSs or, special edition. And Ken, I think it's amazing. Your friend who can just go, you know what? After all these years, I accept it. When I say Star Wars, I mean, I like the original trilogy. And I have so many friends who I think it's hard because they have identified for a long period of their lives as Star Wars fans. But what they like is the original trilogy, and they barely even tolerate Return of the Jedi. It's mostly two films that they like, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think if you like one episode of Star Wars, hey, you're welcome. You're a Star Wars fan. But Jennifer, I think your question is spot on. It's the heart of it. Of like, but are you? If you're a person who's like, I only like these films, don't want to watch the cartoons, and I don't like the others, are you still talking about it? Does every time Star Wars comes out, are you posting online that this is terrible? And that thing that we talk about, the difference between terrible and not for you. And I got no problem with somebody who just loves any one part of Star Wars. I think there are probably people like, I like the sequel trilogy and I don't really like any of the other ones. That's fine too, as long as you aren't constantly being negative online about your subjective preferences, and thinking all of Star Wars should be exactly like the part that you like or the experience that you had. I think that's a lot of the divide. We've been talking about this a lot the last few weeks because of the Acolyte, and we don't need to belabor it. But I think for people who enjoy Star Wars, they don't enjoy all of it, but they want to be able to talk about it online without having as much negativity. Where does this divide come from? I mean, I think the divide has always been there. We just have different means to communicate it. But there are a lot of people online who are, the divide is not about Star Wars, right? It's Star Wars is a useful tool for bad faith actors with motivations that have nothing to do with, was this a good Star War or not? Then there are fans who legitimately didn't like a new Star Wars. And I think the bad faith actors hide behind the people who just legitimately didn't like it. And so for me, trying to separate all that out means if you're going online and you want to find some positivity about Star Wars, maybe the divide that we're feeling is just the way good faith people who just legitimately didn't like a new part of Star Wars, the way they choose to express themselves online. Jennifer, I'm curious from your perspective, if you're online and looking for some positivity and somebody says, I didn't enjoy the Acolyte, it just wasn't for me, are you okay with that? Or does that still bum you out? Or is it the same as somebody saying the Acolyte is trash, it never should have been made? Is there a difference for you in the way that people express the opinions online?
I think it's very complicated. I got a lot of people, whenever I shared anything, saying the writing's bad, the acting's bad. Okay, that's your opinion. That's fine. But now what I have to do oftentimes is look at what your motivation is. Are you just not able to articulate any other point about it? Right? You're allowed to have your opinion. I go to their profile. What is this person generally talking about? Do they have a lot of like negative comments about a lot of things? So it just requires a lot more effort on my part to kind of like figure out like, why are you saying this? And why are you coming into my mentions now suddenly saying like the writing's bad, this is bad, nobody likes this show, nobody watches this show. Okay, but what's your evidence? That's where I feel. I mean, look, I'm never going to go and just be like, that sucks. Like, what? No, I'm going to share why it didn't resonate with me. But maybe I'm just a different person, right? Not everyone. Maybe there's like some 12-year-old kids who are like, it's trash. All right,
that's true. Social media, you don't know.
You don't know.
Maybe they can't tell you why the writing is bad because they're 6 and they don't know any more words, and they're somehow on social media. Ken, for you, in terms of analyzing like where the divide comes from, how much of it do you think is an actual divide versus just people not being sort of kind or clear in the way they express their opinions?
I think that's a huge part of it, and again, we're trying to parse out a very complicated. This goes well beyond Star Wars. This is life. This is social media. This is whatever you want to blame it. I can look at the food conversations. Right. My favorite pizza is pineapple and Canadian bacon, and I'm going to get some a-hole who's going to not joke with me. There's going to be some people who are seriously telling me I'm wrong. F you. I don't need you at my table anymore. Right. Like that's where I am 10 years into that social media, 20 years into social media. 20 years ago on Friendster, it was fun to argue about pineapple on pizza. But now you're sitting down at my table to tell me I'm wrong, that I like this. I don't need you in my life anymore, right? And that's kind of where I look at a lot of the stuff beyond Star Wars. I have less patience for people's opinions on stuff because of the way they talk about it. And again, we're putting a lot of things on the shelf, the socio-political issues, the buzzwords, all the stuff. I'm just talking. I got friends who are posting stuff. Well, here's the problem with Book of Boba Fett. That's your problem with it. That's not my problem with it, because I can tell you why I like it, and that's where we sit. That's where we need to sit. I don't need your unkind and unthoughtful barfing up of words on threads for why you didn't like it anymore. I don't have the patience. We have a show that's now 10, 11 years running. This is what we do, but this is not an invitation to a conversation. The comments are private property, and you don't sit down at the table here and yell about pineapple and pizza to my face anymore. And that's kind of where I'm at. And tracing the divide does come to a lot of how people express it, because not everything's going to work for it. There's a lot of things out there. I've talked about, there's certain bands and music where I'm like, that's not good. That's not good music. But then I have to remember, they've moved people. They've changed people's lives. So who am I to sit down at that table and say, you like that heavy rock band? They're not good. That's my journey. And I think a lot of folks, and we say in our age group, but that's not 100% true, but I think just we deal with it because that's our age group. That's our peer group mostly. is we're hanging out with some 52-year-old sitcom writer who grew up on Empire. And that was a lot of people go to the late great John Schnepp. John Schnepp's power was the ability to love something new and love something as art and love something that was also for someone else. I used to sit with Schnepp all the time at Collider. He was a champion of early Star Wars. He was a champion of stuff. Would he have agreed with everything going forward? I don't know. But he came from him with love and respect for the art. And I think there's a lot of folks, that's what drives me a little crazy. I mean, I'm heated now because I'm defending pineapple on pizza, but not going to Arby's. That's a good choice too in your life too. But if you like Arby's, go to Arby's. So you know what I mean. So I'm trying to get down the root cause of it, but it is how people approach it. Life is not an episode of movie fights. Heckling is not part of comedy clubs and comedy shows, and that's kind of where I get at with a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, I agree strongly. I was thinking the other day about like with the food stuff, like I think especially on social media, sometimes it's put across as a funny thing. And like at this point, like we've all had the pineapple is bad. This kind of, if I post a picture of frozen pizza and people ask me what brand, then I'm going to hear how I'm eating the wrong frozen pizza. And I'm like, I'm sorry, when I bite it, do you taste it in your mouth wherever you are in the world? Like, why? And I think it used to be, as you said, there was a sort of understanding that we're sort of just joking. We're in the Sigmund Freud had an analysis of comedy, a whole book on it, and his joking envelope was the term for it to be an agreement that we were in a joking space. And I feel people hide in that joking envelope and be like, we're just joking. Like, yeah, but you're not, because you're not taking any of the cues that I'm giving you. That I wanted to post something fun about my frozen pizza, then eat it and relax, and you're yelling at me that I'm making a bad choice in my own home. That might be fun for you. It's not fun for me. We're venturing, I think, into pizza land because it's to me a great way to analyze how much division is there in the Star Wars community. Star Wars is now massive, and there's going to be different tastes. There was division when there were only 2 movies of people who liked Empire and people who didn't. There's always going to be people who have different opinions. And I think really what it is, for me, there is the social stuff that is tied to much larger, horrible, serious things. But in terms of, is there division in fans about what parts of Star Wars are good or not? I'm talking total, just good faith opinions or not. I think it really is that people throw elbows, and even the most casual Facebook post, to just be like, this was trash. And I don't think it's about people actually having different opinions or the possibility of interesting discussions. I think it's about framing them in a way that feels so divisive. People like to talk about, if anybody's been lucky enough to go to Star Wars Celebration, it feels like a celebration. It feels like everybody's there. And I know from a fact from people talking to me, people don't have the same taste at Star Wars Celebration, but nobody's going to walk into the Rebels retrospective panel, not be sitting in the panel, just walk into the room and go, it's trash, the art's bad, and then walk back out. I think if we discussed things that should be fun, like Star Wars, online with a little bit more of the rules that we've developed over centuries to be kind to one another in person, I don't think we'd feel the divide as bad. It would just be, different strokes for different folks. It feels like a divide because of the way people express themselves, in my opinion.
Yes. I want to share. I had an incident with my daughter who loves this song. It's called Chug Jug. It is the most ridiculous song about Fortnite and gaming, and and it's sung by a kid, rapped by a kid who took Kanye and Estelle's song. It's so bad, and my daughter and her friends love it, and she wanted to hear it, and I started to be like, "This is terrible." And then I saw the look on her face. I didn't say terrible. I was like, what is this? Like I saw the look on her face, and she looked I saw her face fall because she was sharing something with me that this was what her friends loved. And I felt awful. And it was in that moment, I quickly corrected it. I'm like, okay, let me tell you why I feel this way, because this is the original and blah, blah, blah. And she didn't like the original. And now we listen to it all the time. But it was a crystal clear moment that we forget, especially as we come much more far removed from each other, of what
Mhm.
it feels like to be like, I don't, that you like this? Why? It's so hurtful. And it may be fun for people to do that on the internet, but you would never do that to somebody in real life when you see their face drop, right? Because it's us sharing these celebratory moments of why we love these things is so vulnerable to put yourself out there, and then to have these people just come in, you suck, you don't know anything about good writing, you don't know anything about like good storytelling and good acting. It's like, you would never say that to my face. So it's just, yeah. Anyways, that was a moment where I was like, whoa, this is really powerful. Our words are so powerful in person. We have to remember that online.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and for me, in a way, it's a hopeful thing, because I think a lot of people feel like Boombox Music Talk, that there's this horrible divide in the Star Wars community, and people like different things, and that's fine. And it makes me feel hopeful that if we could express, oh, Book of Boba Fett didn't work for me because I prefer this version of Boba Fett. Now you got a fun conversation. Now you can go, yeah, I really like that part of him too. When did you grow up? What's your favorite book? And like, now we're just having a conversation about what you like, instead of it being about anybody needing to win. Is Ken, you keep saying life is not movie fights. It's, that's supposed to be fun. That was the idea of that, not not a model for interacting.
As the producer of the show for a while, I can pinpoint the moments when it went from being a fun bar-inspired conversation to drastically changing into something serious and unfun and actually mean-spirited at times, and that includes like the fan base gravitated to that. And that was disappointing, where then you would do, well, here's a silly answer. Get him off the show. The comments would be like, get him off the show. Never bring them back. He does not respect movie fights. And it was like, whoa, what has changed? What has changed?
Quicker, easier, more seductive. I want to turn back to the animation specifically as we wrap up our discussion here. So we've been doing some big analysis of what are the reasons for the divide, how much of the divide exists. Jennifer, how do you feel about animation in particular? Do you think that is something that people have legitimate, really different takes of? There are Star Wars fans who love animation and Star Wars fans who want nothing to do with animation. Is that a big schism in the fandom to you?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's just, even with just movie going audiences, TV watching audiences, you either enjoy watching animation or you don't. It is interesting how some people may not like animation in Star Wars or whatever, but then they're willing to go see a Pixar movie because it feels a little bit more adult or something. I don't know. Yeah. And I mean, like, I don't know. I enjoy animation in a lot of ways, more so outside of Star Wars, although I love Bad Batch. It's funny because I'm never drawn to it, but then I always end up enjoying it after I see it, right? So I don't know what that's about.
But I'm in the same spot. It's funny. Yeah, you're saying things I really understand, Jen, because we now famously, Joseph and I have not seen Lion King, the 1993 animated version. I've seen the live action remake, and again, quotations around live action. But I know sometimes my little comedy brand is things I haven't seen and eating 7-Eleven food. But I did not see a lot of any Pixar stuff. I think I've seen Up, WALL-E. Didn't love WALL-E. Like, I didn't go because it's an animated movie. I want to go see live action. So I have that starting approach, and even kind of took that into Star Wars. And I'm like you, Jen. Even Bad Batch I wasn't excited about until I sat down and watched. And I don't know what that is. I don't know. I don't look down on animation. Robotech was the greatest story of my life in the 80s next to Star Wars. So I was there for that. I don't know what it is. And I have a lot of friends, so I'm empathetic to their starting point of it's animation. But I won't even remind myself to push past that to connect with the storytelling, because it's fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the generational thing, I definitely have friends my general age who grew up with the original trilogy, and I think it is hard for them because they had all the toys and they defined themselves as Star Wars fans for years, and then they didn't like the special editions, they didn't like the prequels, they felt like the Clone Wars were just there to shore up the bad writing of the prequels and all that kind of thing, or maybe they give it a try and it's not really for them. And again, as long as they're kind about it. Like everybody who likes any piece of Star Wars is a fan to me. I think maybe there is this interesting difference where if a Star Wars fan is a big fan of animation, I don't think they're a bigger fan, but they might be a more in-depth fan because it takes a time commitment. It's longer than movies. The storytelling is designed to be, yeah, we know Luke and Han and Leia and could spend a lot of time with them in books or comics, but in terms of the visual medium, you get to really sink in and know all of these characters. You get to know this kind of different side of the lore, this different tempo to the storytelling. And to Boombox Music Talk's point, I do think it's maybe a different kind of fan who really wants to be deep in the weeds of Star Wars. And it got to a point where, like, I want that animated storytelling where we spend a lot of time with people. We see new worlds. We might meet a legacy character, but also we meet brand new characters that, somebody who's, only watched movies doesn't know what a Hondo is. But to us, he's a deep legacy character. I don't think it's good or bad. I think it is just different because a big fan of animation in Star Wars has made a time commitment and kind of a lore commitment. So I think they might be a little bit more of an in-depth fan. And I think that is sometimes hard when you've really spent a lot of time in a world and then you talk to somebody who's like, I only watch the movies and I sort of am not, I'm saying this, the thing that you're most invested in is not important. It's just a little side thing to shore it all up. Where you're an animation fan who's given a lot of your time to this and are saying, but it's this whole other world that you know nothing about. And it's a big part of Star Wars to me. I do think that could be a divide if people aren't kind and clear in the way that they talk about it. Because I think you could come off as, you didn't watch all the shows, you don't know the lore, you're not as big a fan as I am. Or it could come off from the other side of, like, the movies are real Star Wars and you watch cartoons. Like, there's on either side of it, it can slip into cruel and judgy really quickly. But I think they are different ways of being a fan.
I agree. Pineapple on pizza is bad. You're an idiot. Those are the ways we can approach two sides of that conversation.
The writing of my frozen pizza is bad. I don't know how it could be, but it is. Jennifer, any final thoughts from you?
No, I mean, animation is a safe bet right now in the industry. And I think for a long time it was seen as kind of like, oh, it's just this thing that's not as important or not as good of storytelling. And I think time and again, we've seen it in Star Wars and in other properties and other stories where it's like, no, the animation is telling some incredible stories that are making a huge impact, creating fan bases around them. And like I said, Clone Wars kept the Star Wars fandom alive during that time. So
yeah, and Clone Wars is sometimes my favorite Star Wars thing, and I get the warmest glow. And maybe there's a part of it too. And my final thought is, I don't think I know there's some people who have been negative about specific animated shows and kind of repeated the same arguments about filler episodes and things like that. So I know there is negativity about the animated shows, but I just don't think it's as loud too. So it sometimes feels like for a long, long time, maybe somebody my age would make fun of the Clone Wars for just being a tool to shore up the prequels. But for the most part, if somebody wanted to talk to me about the Clone Wars, it was because they loved it. And I think that is also a nice aspect of going, yeah, I'm a Star Wars animated fan. For the most part, people aren't going to invest that amount of time just to hate it.
Yeah, it's so funny going like the filler episode conversation, which is one I despise. But even that is mostly all positive Star Wars loving people who just come into the room to be like, filler, non-filler. It's very rare that someone from the outside just walks through and goes, I kind of like Star Wars. It was a filler episode, and walks out. Like it's mostly the calls are coming from inside the house on that stuff, on animation side.
Yeah. Well, I hope a new animated show is announced soon. Thank you for this deep and complex topic. And I hope Boombox Music Talk that you appreciated all of our pizza thoughts as well as our Star Wars thoughts. We're going to take a quick break and we'll be back with another great essay/question in a moment. And we have returned. We talked a little bit about the dark side, and now we get to talk about the light side. This is something that we have been asking people to do in past times. We used to have a segment called Power of the Light Side, kind of just trying to push back a little bit on the amount of negativity there can be. We just ask people to share something they loved in Star Wars, be a character, a scene, a behind the scenes detail, whatever. So this person who I shamefully did not write down the name, and I will look it up after we read to share who sent this in. My bad there. But here is the thought and the question. Hello there, Joseph, Jennifer, and Ken. I want to quickly preface that most of what I'm writing is not a question. I was thinking about how much I missed your old Power of the Light segment, and I had an experience recently that I felt really matched that spirit, so I thought I'd try to include it here. There's a question related to it at the end, so if this is reaching, please feel free to skip ahead and focus on the question. We are not skipping ahead. But I thought I'd go over it and see what happens. ForceCenter has done so much for me over the years, and one of those things has been to appreciate and value the toys and merchandise of Star Wars, particularly the action figures. This was something that was just not a part of my life growing up, and I never really sought it out. However, your stories about what these small pieces of art mean to you, how they represent the stories we love, and the tales of how you came to get them have inspired me nonstop. It was a whole new part of the fandom that I was getting to experience through new eyes. I still am not a collector of action figures, but I've always loved hearing about it. However, just recently, I had an awakening. I was in the antique mall that I love visiting, and they have a space for Star Wars action figures. While I have never been tempted to buy anything, I always like looking at their options. Just taking another glance, I was nearly about to leave, but then I saw something. A 3 3/4 Attack the Clones figure of Barriss Offee. She was standing in an epic pose with her cape and robes flowing, a determined look on her face. It had a piece of plastic Geonosis rock to stand on. Her green lightsaber could fit in one hand, and the other hand had a magnet that could attach for different poses. And there was even a blaster deflection piece you could attach to the lightsaber, all in one complete package. There were other nice action figures I could have gotten, but I chose Barriss because I was inspired. She was on my mind because of the incredible story she had in Tales of the Empire. I adored those shorts and couldn't stop thinking about them many months later. This figure showed Barriss as a determined and heroic Jedi, and now I knew that she reclaimed that. Though we saw her at a different part of her life after she made mistakes, she rose to grow beyond them, spend years saving others, and helped another Inquisitor find the way out. I'm in chills thinking about it right now, and when I see this figure, I think with pride of what this amazing character will achieve, so I bought it. But my purchasing of this figure goes beyond my love of a character. Not going to lie, things have been a little bit of a drag in the fandom with all the bad faith arguments around the Acolyte and the fact that it didn't get renewed. Sometimes I wish I knew why people are choosing to let go of their joy, and it impacts me. Certainly not been impacted nearly as bad as others, but the ripples are felt. But one look at this figure reminded me of how much joy I have. Joy for still being blessed with new Star Wars stories this many years later, to the point that I'm looking at a character in a whole new light that could never have been dreamed of when this figure was made. Joy for the lessons and growth Star Wars has provided for me time and time again, and joy for the amazing people that are still out there and having a wonderful discussions of this silly little space franchise, including a certain podcast that taught me to embrace the joy of action figures. Not going to call myself a major collector yet, but the future can come later. For now, I will be present for this moment and all the joy it brought me. You three have long preached the importance of these figures, and I can say this, I finally get it. Sorry for the long post. If you skip it, I understand. Didn't skip it. Now for the question. What is something that has recently brought you Star Wars joy? May the Force be with you always. Ken, do you have a general reaction, and then we can get into the specific moment of joy?
Yeah. No, I love this. No, we love the Power of the Light side kind of vibe here. I think it's needed, and there's just something about the figures. Even though I don't collect as much, like I always say, I still take that turner on the corner, and I still see things that maybe that's going to find its way into my collection simply because of what you're talking about. It is joy. It's so funny. I was gifted. My friend of mine, Robbie Smith, who I do a show with, I was gifted a while ago. I'm looking at it. It's a Star Wars The Mandalorian hot chocolate box. It's got like 6 mugs, some hot chocolate that's probably not good anymore. And I have so many mugs, and I don't drink hot chocolate as much as I used to. I can't get rid of it because every time I look at it, I'm like, I don't know. It's got Grogu on a mug. Like, I like that. I like that. And that's the power of all this stuff. It is the joy in our grasp. It is the joy from the screen to our shelves, and that's and you can do that in different ways. And you don't have to get every little thing. You don't have to keep buying every little thing. You could find those things. In fact, maybe it's even more powerful to find those things that specifically move you, especially when you least expect it. So great story there. And as far as What recently brought me joy? I'm going to think for a second. Jen, I'll let you
Okay.
answer for a bit. I'm going to think. I'm going to give a good answer here that isn't hot chocolate.
The person who sent that in is James Pasqualucci. Apologies for my
James, yeah.
poor putting together of this rundown. Thank you, James, for this great story and thought. Jennifer, what are your reactions to this story?
James, this is a wonderful story, and it reminds me about why it's very important for me to not get swept up in the moment when I see lots of different action figures or whatever in Target, and be like, what really speaks to me? Because I think when these products started coming back with the sequel trilogy, I just was going nuts and just be like buying everything just because it's like Star Wars is back. And then I was like, okay, now Star Wars has overtaken my house. I really need to be a little bit more what sparks joy. And so that's why I'm being a little bit choosier now. But boy, I was thinking about Star Wars Celebration. And when you go down the vintage aisles, oh my gosh, I've gotten so many I've gotten necklaces, vinyl placemats that I use, all sorts of great figures. And I was thinking about that the other day. I'm like, I wish I could go to Tokyo just for that experience. It's like treasure hunting.
Yeah. Yeah, no, don't get me started. That's my happy place. It's one of my happy places. I remember texting my wife the first Star Wars Celebration. I went to the one in Anaheim very briefly in 2015, but the Chicago one, they were really all in. It's like I have a beer on the show floor and I'm surrounded by action figures, and just text to my wife like, I'm so happy. I love this story. One of the parts that I love about this story is it is about finding new ways to see Star Wars and to experience it. Great story about not really being a collector until that moment of something really sparked a joy. And I love what James says about none of what is so powerful about Barriss right now, that her great story in the Clone Wars and in Tales of the Empire, which I agree is really powerful, of her reclaiming of being a Jedi, is one of the great the Jedi are the actual heroes moments to me, the way that beat feels, even though they make mistakes. But just that great point that none of that was known by anybody in 2002 when this Attack of the Clones figure came out. And I really relate to that, because when Attack of the Clones came out, I was really feeling it. I had my ups and downs with Phantom Menace, but I loved Attack of the Clones, and I really didn't have any money, and I really shouldn't have been buying action figures. And when these came out, they were really different style. The Phantom Menace and the Power of the Force were still a little bit like, they're not as many points of articulation, and a little bit more, just kind of statuesque. And then 2002, they're like, let's change it up. And like every character's legs are like, I don't think actual Hayden Christensen's legs spread that far in that pose. It's like big, wild packages. And I remember feeling kind of relieved in 2002, because like, I was going to get a credit card and buy all of these, but I don't really like them. And I felt saved at the time. But now years have passed, and Attack of the Clones is one of my favorite films, as messy and weird as it is. And now I see those figures, and they're so different, and they're so wild that they come with random pieces of rock, and the Coleman Trebor action figure is posed, collapsed, dead on the rocks after being taken out by Jango Fett. Just a wild collection of action figures. I recently picked up this Kenobi that's specifically to fight the beasts in the Geonosian arena. And he comes with this spike, and he's all stressed out, the legs spread. You can chain him up. I think he does come with a chain, maybe. You can chain him to the post. So for me, even as a collector of action figures, I love how much time can change our own perspective. That I wasn't that into these figures when they came out, and now I get to enjoy them all these years later because they exist in a different context. So I really relate to that part of the story. I think it's really beautiful.
Love that.
So moving on to what sparks joy for us now, Ken, it could be collecting, it could be anything. It could be a surprise that Star Wars is taking you on, that you didn't normally enjoy it this way, but now you have. What's joyful in this moment?
I got to think of the most recent kind of burst of joy I felt, and it was, I know I've mentioned on the show before, and maybe a life adventure section, but it was recently rewatching A Star Wars Story. It was a month or so ago. Watched it over the course of a couple days on a treadmill, which is always kind of fun for me to do, and a lot of, a month ago, we know what was going on in the Star Wars fandom, the landscape, and it's maybe even gotten worse since then. But it was a lot of debating over current shows in the last few years in the business and all this stuff, and some of it valid, some of it maybe not, but it didn't matter. It was just this big kind of, flame that was burning, and I wanted to walk away, and I just put on Solo, a movie I love. And, in 2018 into 2019, the conversation around Solo was exhausting, whether you like the film or not. It was exhausting. It wasn't in 2024 because no one's in the room. It's just me. And I was able to focus on the things about that movie that I love. And there's so much. And the adventure and the energy and the smiles, the jokes, the humor, the poignant moments, which are some of my favorite in Star Wars. And down to the very ending with Han and Chewie punching it for the first time together as a team, knowing where life takes them. I'm so in love with that movie, and it was nice to revisit that because it had been a couple years since I'd even put it on. A lot of that has to do with us getting busy covering a lot of the shows, discussing a lot of the shows. Wasn't disconnected from any of those films. It was just like didn't have time like I used to just put on Solo in the background. So I got to do it, and got to do it with quietness around me. No debate, no discussion, no rancor. Just me, Han, Kira, Chewie, Tobias Beckett chewing on food while he has little comments. Lando. It was so much fun. It was
Yeah.
great.
That's great. I have a lot of these little moments of joy because that's how I stay connected to Star Wars. And sometimes they just happen, and sometimes I plan them. Sometimes I'm like, I want a little spark of joy, so I'm going to kind of seek out something. Two specific ones. One was very planned. For my recent 50th birthday, I did the show the night before because I always really enjoy having a day off after a show. So I thought that was a great way to celebrate my actual birthday. And one of the things I did is go to this great toy store in the Valley, not far from Ken, Blast from the Past, because they have a pretty good collection of Star Wars action figures and got a bunch of those super weird 30th anniversary. So I went there like a little kid telling myself I can only have one. So like, what's the one that's going to be like, this is a significant birthday and I want to reflect a little bit on where I've been and all that. And picked out the great weird Luke Skywalker, which the actual Luke Skywalker action figure, Return of the Jedi, pretty straightforward, great lightsaber. But then just comes with a bone, and it's the bone that he sticks in the Rancor's mouth. But if you're not looking at the action figure in that context, it's just like, why does Luke Skywalker have a Fred Flintstone, part of this action figure? Why is that his accessory? A lightsaber and a bone, the way Luke Skywalker goes around. Is that perfect? Like, it's all the depth of my love and journey with, that character being the starting point of my love and the character I identified with. But also just loving the weird side of it and the silly side of it. And he comes with a bone. And they're trying to emulate his wound on his hand before he puts the glove on, but it's not done particularly well. So he just has a massive red dot. Like he's like
just an ink dot.
It's like he went to a club and he got like a big hand stamp that didn't come off. Like that's the stamp he had to get when he came into Jabba's club.
Oh my
So
god!
Amazing.
Yeah. And the other one, just real quick, the way I'm getting joy from Star Wars is I've always enjoyed the behind the scenes, but the behind the scenes element of Star Wars, the stories of how, especially the early films got made, are really inspiring to me now because it was made under such adversity, and I'm really working hard to make things of my own. And there is a lot of adversity. So getting to see the Dijkstraflex camera that's in person at the Academy Museum, which is just this sort of symbol of creativity and ingenuity and why not, that opened the door to so much. That was a really joyful moment. So Jennifer, we are on to your moments that spark joy. What moment sparked joy for you recently?
You guys should have gone last. Honestly, to be totally truthful, nothing. And that's okay. That's all right. The only thing that's really been like my heart was as I've talked about, the white whale Ewok statue from Sideshow Collectibles. I've been talking about this for months. That's the only thing where it's like, I have to have that. In terms of putting on the movies, putting on the shows, I just haven't. I don't really ever get to watch the TV. Very rarely. And it's okay that Star Wars is just like on my shelf right now. It's okay. and I'm getting into like miniatures, and it's kind of fun to explore other fandoms. And my kids aren't really into Star Wars, so getting a bond with them over miniatures. And as I was telling my eldest daughter, I was talking about John Dykstra, I was talking about ILM, and I was like, oh my gosh, they used miniatures to make the original Star Wars. And she was like, what? Her mind was blown, and I was like, all right, this is my in. So I got to remember to show her that. But yeah, so it's okay. My fandom right now, I don't want to say it's dormant. It's there. I'm sure it'll be, alive and thriving in a Skeleton Crew mode. But right now, it's just asleep. It's okay.
I think
Blythe is alive. My Blythe doll fandom is alive.
I think it's great. I think we talked about this a little bit last week, that fandoms evolve, and I don't think that I don't think it's a good fandom to be in a rat race and to be like, yes, I did 87 things this week. I think it is fine that it ebbs and flows. It's a relationship.
Yeah. I've eaten a lot of Star Wars.
You said some stuff in that conversation about fandom evolving last week, Jen, that was important for me to hear. Of like, sometimes there's a panic you can feel, not just because we've had a podcast that's long running, but just because it's been our lives, right? Like, you've been here since 70s and 80s, and so when you put it on the shelf for whatever reason, you feel like panicked. Am I ever going to pick it up again? And I think no secret, coming out of the strikes, coming out of the Ahsoka series, which was by far my least favorite of live action so far, I just wasn't feeling things, and I think that panic can cause you to be like, well, I guess it's all done. I guess I don't love this anymore, and that's not true, and that's just not true. I've learned that to not completely let go or know when things come back. I suddenly am watching football again, which I hadn't for 10 years. I am picking up golf again. I'm like all these things where I'm like, I thought I had put that somewhere, and it's okay to put that somewhere. Hell, I did that with stand-up. I walked away 3 times for a lot of reasons, but thought it's just not something I do anymore. And you don't. Sometimes it isn't. Sometimes you can completely walk away. I'll never be working in pro wrestling again. I don't want to. But other things you don't have to. And I think that's kind of where you're at right now for a lot of reasons. That isn't just about the fandom, but just about life. I mean, you got those Blythe dolls. Jar Jar can't beat a Blythe doll right now, and that's okay.
Eventually, though, there'll be Star Wars Blythe dolls, right? Like, it's just...
Oh, yeah, I'm getting her little accessories and stuff. Yeah, no, I mean, I got her... well, it's not Star Wars. I got her a Spaceballs t-shirt. I thought that was kind of funny.
Yeah.
Well, if she needs a small bone, maybe I can share my Luke Skywalker bone.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Great essay. Thank you, James, for bringing back the Power of the Light Side segment and asking this great question so we can all reflect on our joys in the natural ebb and flow of our relationship with the things we love. Ken, you want to take us home?
I do. Hey, you can find us, ForceCenter Pod, on social media, including Blue Sky and Threads, Instagram as well. Facebook page is ForceCenter Podcast. We're available as a podcast in a lot of spots. Just search, you'll find us. Merch available 2 spots right now, TeePublic at tpublic.com/user/ForceCenter. And we launched a fourth wall shop. Got a couple items there, working on more. It's just a matter of time, but it's there. So check it out, patreon.com/ForceCenter, so we can support us directly. Follow me at Ken Napzok. Go to my website, kennapzok.com, for more. Jen, where can they find you and your Blythe doll adventures?
And I do share Star Wars art and different random Star Wars things on my Instagram at Jennifer Landa or TikTok at Jennifer Landa 1138.
There you go. Joseph, take us home. You got some information on where to support your film as well.
That is right. You can find me on Blue Sky, Threads, Instagram at Joseph Scrimshaw is the handle there. You can go to my website, josephscrimshaw.com, that has information on all the film stuff I've been doing. In particular, I'm working on putting together a feature film, and if you want to help make that happen, there is a link to contribute to the film. It's a one-time tax-deductible donation to the film processed through this great organization called Film North. So if you might be interested, check it out. And if you're not interested, I totally understand. Thank you so much. This has been Cues of the Force.